Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to a brand new episode of Liam's First Look. And if you guys are rocking with the show for a long time, then you know we actually did a first look for this card already. UFC Vegas 84. Unfortunately, we have lost a couple fights on this card. I lost internet connection the first time that I went live talking about this fight because of some inclement weather here in the great state of New York. So without further ado, I wanted to get back into this card and pick up where we left off last time, which was talking about Phil Hawes against Bruno Ferreira, which is a main card bout. And so if you guys haven't checked it out, you can check out the other prediction show that I did. You know, I go over all those fights. I also have all of those fights clipped out if you're interested. However, I want to make sure that we cover all our bases this week. So let's talk about this fight first. Phil Hawes against Bruno Ferreira in the middleweight division. And this is an interesting fight at first look. Both of these guys are coming off of a knockout loss in pretty devastating fashion. And when I'm looking at a matchup like this, I say to myself, you know, Phil Hawes, he's a guy that I think the UFC has kind of tried to cash out. You know, that's not a very polite thing to say, but that's what it looks like to me in terms of how they're matchmaking Phil Hawes. You know, he goes from fighting Duran Win, right? Getting an easy win, so to speak, right? Goes out there, earns that, no problem. But then he's faced with Roman Dolidze, top guy, dangerous, talented in all positions. And not only does Roman Dolidze knock him out in brutal fashion to end that fight, prior to the finish, he rips a deep heel hook and appears to damage the knee of Phil Hawes pretty significantly. And for me, one of my biggest betting regrets of the year is not hammering Ikram Alaskarov ITD against Phil Hawes. The reason being, he had his knee destroyed and he got brutally knocked out, which is not the first time that's happened in his career. He's been brutally knocked out many times. But then they put him against a Russian killer who also, you know, has the capability to knock him out on the feet or submit him on the ground. It just seemed like they were doing him no favors. And I'm looking at a guy in Bruno Ferreira who, you know, bursts on the scene with a nice win over Gregory Robocop Rodriguez. That's not a win that a lot of people have in the UFC. You know, Robocop is a pretty tough guy. You know, he's had a little bit of up and down results, but we've got to remember he has the wins over Tululian, Injakwani, Marquez, Jin Young Park, Dusko Todorovic, Josh Fremd. So he's not a guy that you know, is lacking for some quality wins. And Bruno Ferreira was able to starch him, right? Catch him early, knock him out in the first round. But unfortunately, you know, he was dealt the same fate by Nursultan Ruziboev. A lot of people were saying Nursultan had no chance. He was a bum. He was a fraud. But I was looking at a guy in Nursultan who was absolutely massive. If you look at the size differential in that fight, guys, he was 6'5" compared to just 5'10" for Bruno Ferreira. And there's no reach listed on Tapology, but I believe he also had a significant reach advantage in that spot. So for me, I bet Nursultan Ruziboev. I thought that was a good bet. You know, last year on the money line at plus 190 because he had such a big size advantage. And you have two guys that were going to go out there and swing and bang. And the truth is, I don't know all that much about, you know, Bruno Ferreira. I feel like he hasn't fought that many tough fighters, but he beat Leon Aliu on Contender Series. He beat Gregory Rodriguez in the UFC. So he's not a complete slouch, right? He's got some real wins, but he can get shinned in the first round. I'm looking at this matchup, though, and I say to myself, who does the UFC want to rebuild out of these two guys that both got knocked out in the first round in their last fight? And I think the answer is obvious to me, which is Bruno Ferreira, right? He's a slight favorite in this matchup, and I think that's probably fair. Now, what's interesting is he's dealing with another guy who's not going to have as significant a height advantage, right? He's not 6'5" or whatever like Ruziboev, but Phil Hawes is going to be 6 foot tall compared to just 5'10" for Bruno Ferreira. He is going to have a significant reach advantage here with the you know, arm reach, but I just don't know that Phil Hawes is going to be able to leverage that. I think we've seen at times guys are able to get to Phil Hawes with power shots. They're able to hurt him bad, and also they're able to mix in the grappling. So I think that this is a interesting, you know, matchup on paper, but I'm definitely leaning towards the Bruno Ferreira side here. As who the UFC is looking to get behind, who they're looking to rebuild. And I think Evolution Thai is not a bad gym, right? It's not as quality as Killcliff, but I think that, he's probably getting good training, good looks in, and he's a uh, young-ish, right? Only 31 years of age here, and hasn't suffered as many knockout losses. So for me, I just think it's much more likely that Ferreira can bounce back here and kind of find himself again. Whereas Phil Hawes, I think the ship may have sailed a little bit on his potential at 35 years of age with the catastrophic knee injury, with the multiple knockout losses at critical points in his career. Those are some things I can't ignore. Shout out to the chat. Kalastrom says, "What's up, bro? What are you doing for New Year's turn up?" Not too sure. I think I might just be, partying with the fam or something, but we'll see what happens, brother. Either way, I wish the best to everybody. Happy New Year's to all you guys. And without further ado, we can move on from this fight to the next fight. But I think Bruno Ferreira probably gets it done and probably gets it done by knockout. The next fight on the card, according to Tapology, is going to be between Andrei Arlovski and Waldo Cortes-Acosta in the heavyweight division. And you've got the former professional baseball player here, Waldo Cortes-Acosta, the guy who seems like he's got the better athletic pedigree. You just look at this guy's Instagram. He looks like a much more fit fiddle, right? Compared to an Andrei Arlovski, who's a lot longer in the tooth, an older fighter here, but a very experienced, savvy guy, 44 years of age, almost 45. That is definitely quite old for this UFC level. And he is on a 2-fight losing skid. He got submitted by Marcos Rogerio de Lima. He got knocked out in the first round by Dante Mays. So a couple of bad looks for Arlovski in his last two. And now they're giving him the Salsa Boy. And the Salsa Boy is a big favorite here, minus 400 or so. And that's where it becomes a little concerning, right? It's like Waldo is a guy that is sometimes content to fight to the decision, right? Last time out, he went out there and finally broke through, got that stoppage, knocked out Luca Spretsky in the first round. But when you look, he got decision by Marcos Rogerio de Lima. That was just 7 months ago, right? And when you look at Andrei Arlovski's career, I'll just tell you where I've gotten burnt trying to fade this guy is fights that go to decision in the UFC Apex. He's clearly lost fights before, like the Jake Collier fight, and it didn't matter. They just gave it to him anyway because it's Arlovski, and he's got the fan favorite. He's got people cheering for him and all this stuff. But I do think that Waldo probably going to be too fast, probably going to be a little bit too dynamic with the hands. And if Dante Mays can take you out of there with the hands, then, Waldo could probably do the same. But I just think if Waldo gets content and doesn't put the pedal to the floor here, doesn't really distance himself from Arlovski, he could be really looking down the mirror of a gross split decision because you could outland Arlovski by 20 strikes, whatever it is. They're just going to find a way to give it to him more often than not in that Apex Center. So be warned. That is something to consider for sure. But looking at Arlovski, overall, his body of work, he really hasn't been beating many quality opponents in this latter portion of his career. Jake Collier by split decision. I think he lost that fight, so he could arguably be on a 3-fight losing skid right now. Jared Vandera, not a great win, gets it by split decision. Carlos Boy Felipe, not a great win. I don't believe he's with the organization anymore, gets it by unanimous decision. And then Chase Sherman, terrible win. Guy that's, barely clung to a job in the UFC, let's say. So we wish him the best. But looking back, Tom Aspinall, the last time he fought somebody who is a little bit young, dynamic, was able to take him down, submit him quite easily in that second round after almost knocking him out in the first round. He got the win over Tanner Boser. I don't think he won that fight either. I thought Tanner Boser deserved the nod there. Obviously, Tanner Boser kind of left that fight in the hands of the judges. He also didn't throw enough head strikes. He kind of left that fight up in the air, but he landed a million leg kicks and Arlovski landed like 8 punches and they gave it to Arlovski. So just an example of the kind of Apex dynamic I'm talking about. Then he got the win over Felipe Lynch when Lynch was looking like he didn't care and wasn't on steroids. And now Lynch looks like he does care and is on steroids. So big difference there in his performances. And then he got knocked out by Jairzinho Rosenstrike. So those are all his fights since 2019. And it hasn't been smooth sailing when he fights guys that have some talent And I think Waldo has more talent than a Collier, than a Vandera, than a Felipe, than a Sherman, even than a Dante Mays. So I think he's probably going to get it done here. But the price tag for me in this heavyweight division with a guy who's gone to decision a couple times is pretty prohibitive as far as I'm considering this one. Appreciate you as well, Cole. Always glad to hear from you in the chat, my man. Thanks for being here. So I think we could wrap that fight up with the heavyweights and not spend too much time there. And we can move along to this next fight, which is scheduled between Matthew Semelsberger and Preston Parsons. So in this fight, guys, Matthew Semelsberger is, kind of struggling a little bit in his recent UFC run, right? 5-4 in the organization. And you look at the recent run, it hasn't been so good, right? He started off pretty hot, win over Carlton Minus, win over Jason Witt, 4-1 in his first 5 fights. But since then, right, we've seen lost to Uros Medic in his most recent fight, got finished there, got TKO'd. Kind of a bad look because Uros Medic, not a guy who's very proficient on the ground. So it seems like Semelsberger could have had a path to getting takedowns and looking for some opportunities there, like a Jalen Turner has, like a Mirtabek Oralbai, a guy from a weight class down was able to do. And so I think that was kind of an indictment of Semelsberger's brawling style. And you look at his striking on the feet, he went out there against Jeremiah Wells, had a close fight. The takedown defense didn't really hold up in that one. Against Jake Matthews, got the win, courtesy of a bunch of knockdowns. I mean, the thing that you have to note about Matthew Semelsberger is his incredible knockdown rate. I think he's had like 10 knockdowns in 9 UFC fights, right? So he's definitely doing something right with the power, but he also fought a pretty low level of competition. Martin Sano, Jason Witt, Carlton Minus. I mean, these just aren't very high level UFC guys for sure. And he did not finish Carlton Minus, but he did finish Jason Witt and Martin Sano with the shocking quickness. So when I'm looking at this matchup in particular, I think that the path for Preston Parsons is obvious, right? He's got to take this fight to the ground and try and get on top of Matthew Semelsberger because when he's on the feet, this guy's taking way too much damage. I think his striking's not there. I think the fact that he wasn't able to finish Evan Elder was a little bit concerning because that's a guy coming up from a different weight class. And you look at the Daniel Rodriguez fight, he got blown out of the water on short notice there. He lost to Trevin Giles. I mean, Officer Trevin Giles is a talented guy, but he's also been on hard times. Struggled a little bit with his chin and some other problems. So losing that fight, dropping the split decision there, I don't know that speaks very well either. So I think that, Basel Hafez, that original matchup, I thought Basel Hafez was going to run through Preston Parsons, to tell you the truth. I thought he was going to be stronger. I thought he was going to be the better grappler. So now this is a much more tricky fight for me because I don't think Semelsberger is a great grappler. I think he's kind of deficient in those areas potentially. So this is a curious matchup for me, and definitely one that I'm going to have to tape study a little bit closer. But looking at the record of Preston Parsons, I mean, he's been submitted on the regional scene back in 2017. He got knocked out by Mike Perry back in 2015. We'll forgive that one. Mike Perry's a badass, right? But he hasn't really fought a very high level of competition, fought a lot of guys with losing records as well. So I just don't really know what to make of a guy like Preston Parsons right now. His only win in the UFC, like I mentioned, is over a 155-pounder. So now he's going to be taking on a pretty big guy at 170 in Matthew Semelsberger. And Semelsberger's lost to, fairly quality fighters, Chaos Williams, Alex Morono, Jeremiah Wells, Uros Medic, maybe his worst loss, but he also knocked down Uros Medic in that fight. And looked like he was close to winning it at points, but ended up getting caught. It's a fight game. It's 170 pounds. You could forgive a little bit of that, but I do just think that Semelsberger has some holes in his game. He could be touched on the chin. He could be outlanded. He could be taken down. So couple flaws that make him hard to back at chalk prices for me. And let's just pull up best fight odds because I don't even know what the odds are on this fight. So looking at the odds, I'll mention the odds for all 3 fights that we've discussed so far, just so we all are on the same page here, guys. The best available price on Bruno Ferreira is -120, and that's available on FanDuel Sportsbook. The best price available on Phil Hawes is plus 105 over on Caesars at BetMGM. As far as Andrei Arlovski and Waldo Cortes-Acosta is concerned, minus 395 on DraftKings is the best price on Waldo, and plus 330 on FanDuel Sportsbook is the best price that I'm seeing on Andrei Arlovski. And last but not least, let's find this fight we're talking about right now, which is Semelsberger and Parsons. Semelsberger right now, slight favorite, minus 130, coming in against Preston Parsons, at the plus 110. So short favorite here for Matthew Semelsberger. I lean towards him getting the job done here, but it's also on short notice coming off a couple losses. Maybe that's not ideal circumstances. So I'd have to do a lot more due diligence before I backed him. But I think that this is a curious fight. And I understand why Parsons is an underdog, though. I do have some skepticism about his game and his upside. With that being said, folks, let's move along to the next fight here, which is a really interesting one. And shout out to Marcus McGhee. He retweeted my post yesterday. And I asked, is Marcus McGhee going to be able to rattle off 3 straight wins in the UFC and 3 straight finishes? Because this guy has burst on the scene in the bantamweight division. A little bit older, right? 33 years of age as a bantamweight, not something that is normally going to work out for people long-term in the UFC. However, this is a guy that, went out there against Journey Newson, got the rear naked choke in round 2. Went out there against JP Buys, dropped him with the right hook in the first round. So now he's going out there as a pretty substantial favorite against Gaston Bolanos. And Gaston Bolanos, he's an interesting case, right? Because he has 1 win in the UFC, but he also hasn't been very active, right? His only win was in April against Aaron Phillips. He went to a decision there. Wasn't the most memorable fight. And then he had a win in 2022 in Bellator against Daniel Carey. But prior to that, he had not fought since 2020. So he had that 2-year gap. And he had not been fighting the highest level of competition. He had not been fighting the most experienced guys. So I think this is interesting matchmaking because on the one hand, Gaston Bolanos has some losses, but he is a younger fighter in this spot. These two guys are similar sized. And I think that the guy that the UFC would prefer to win here, honestly, is Gaston Bolanos. He represents multiple demographics. He's a guy that I think could be marketable for the company. They signed him from Bellator. They don't do that with everybody. But I think when you look at Marcus McGhee, they're happy with where he's at right now and how he's been producing. He goes out there, he gets the wins, he makes them fun and entertaining scraps. So if you can continue to do that in the UFC, they're obviously going to look to promote you. They're going to look to move you up the card. But right now, he's a little bit of an older guy. And I think that they're trying to find this winnable fight for Gaston Bolanos. So, you look at the betting odds, that's not what it reflects, right? It reflects it's going to be a steamroll for the Maniac. And I think that that's possible. Right. I think that he is getting better all the time, right? Working with good fighters. Arizona is a hotbed for talent in the bantamweight division. Kyler Phillips, Sean O'Malley. Need I go on? I mean, there's a laundry list of talents. Henry Cejudo, a lot of guys, a conglomerate of those guys training in Las Vegas with the Basharat brothers and Aljamain Sterling and, Patchy Mix and a lot of other names at Extreme Couture and 10th Planet Vegas. Like there's a lot of crossover talent where these pools of great fighters are. And I think that that's one that we have to pay attention to. The MMA lab in Arizona producing a lot of good talent. However, Gaston Bolanos, if I'm pulling up his Instagram right now, I want to see exactly where he's been training at. But I was taking a look at this before. Seems like he's been getting in work in Peru. And Peruvian MMA has been on the rise. So, want to give the credit there where it's due. Also looks like he's been doing some cross training in Vegas. So I think that Gaston Bolanos could present a new product here. Shout out to our guy, Dennis Barrier, says, good night. Appreciate you being here, brother. And I think that this is a interesting matchup, and the line movement has been fascinating, right? Opens up minus 120, Marcus McGhee on DraftKings Sportsbook, and it is all the way out to a minus 258. So I think that that's something to watch, just a lot of public action here on the McGhee side. But it's definitely moved the line heavily, right? So the odds makers are respecting the money, but it's definitely a lot different than where they opened it up. Shout out to Dixon, says, hi, Liam, shopping at BJ's. Wouldn't miss the show for the world. Appreciate you big time. And Saga Analysis says, not really sold on Bolanos, but his coach is seriously good. He's trained a lot of dudes like PFL champion Pinedo. Yeah, I think that's something really to watch out for. Like I said, Peruvian MMA is certainly on the rise in and out of the UFC. So shout out to Gaston Bolanos, shout out to Peru and everything that they've got going on. I think that this is going to be a hell of a scrap, right? I think Marcus McGhee is a good fighter, fun guy, talented, well-rounded, but I also just don't know that what we've seen from him in the UFC against the quality of competition we've seen him fight has shown to me that he's 70%, 80%, whatever, to win a fight like this. So, I probably think that the steam is a little bit too aggressive here, personally. But with that being said, we can move to the next fight. Speaking of talented conglomerations in this bantamweight division, we've got two great fights in a row, right? We got Marcus McGhee taking on Gaston Bolanos. Great fight. That's the one we just discussed. The one we're about to discuss is the aforementioned Farid Basharat taking on Taylor Lapilus. And this is a fascinating bantamweight matchup. Why? Because you have two guys that have opposite styles, that both are very talented, and we got to figure out exactly, where they stand, right? Taylor Lapilus, a guy who's been in and out of the UFC. He's back, right? He's been on a good run, got the win over the Irishman, Cowlin Loughran. And now it's a whole different scene, right? We've got Farid Basharat, who is a ground specialist, right? He wants to take you down. He wants to smother you from on top. He wants to pass your guard, and he wants to control you, dominate you, submit you, finish you. So I think that Farid is a problem. I think he's a real dangerous guy. I think he's extremely talented with his grappling. And I think that, when you look back, right, the win over Damon Blackshear, I think, is aging like fine wine. That's another very talented grappler. That's a guy who got the twister, right? He's on the submission of the year list for people. And he got summarily outgrappled by Farid Basharat, who was smart positionally, who knew exactly where he needed to be, where to keep his hips. And I think that, it's one thing to expect Cowlin Loughran, to switch opponents on short notice and go out there and out-grapple a guy like Taylor Lapilus, who's pretty dang tough and pretty hard to put on the ground. Big, strong guy. But also, I think when you can get past the side kicks, when you can get past a little bit of that range management, then I think that you could really maybe expose some of those grappling layers if you can get deeper than that first exchange, right? What did we always see from Cyril Gane? We always saw he did a great job of, out-grappling people that were not good, and then keeping the fights at his range and his distance and managing. And then John Jones goes in there, takes him to the ground, and instantly grabs a hold of his neck, and he's just tapping right away, right? Looked like he hadn't been deeper into some of those grappling exchanges. He kind of was able to manage them all. And I think the same thing could be true for Lapilus, right? In his recent fights, I think he's been able to manage a lot of these grappling exchanges. And I think if Basharat is able to really get on top, set up shop, get to his office, I think he could be able to pass the guard and potentially finish somebody like Lapilus, which would be very hard to do. But I also think that Lapilus is not an easy mark, right? If he's not able to get takedowns, I think this could become a very greasy fight. I think it becomes very difficult, to project him as a clear winner here. So for me, the pricing is contingent on takedowns, right? Farid Basharat minus 245, best available price in the market on FanDuel Sportsbook, plus 210, best available comeback on Taylor Lapilus over at BetMGM. And you're looking at two guys that are both talented. One of them's plus 210. However, I think the Basharat brothers are for real. I've thought that for a while. And I think that Farid is a phenomenal top player with really strong physicality behind him. And so for me, that's my deciding factor. I think that Farid might surprise people by submitting, Taylor Lapilus in this spot. I don't think a lot of people are necessarily expecting that. Just looking at the Tapology votes, I think a lot of people expect this to go the distance. But I just think if he's able to get to the positions, that would make him a favorite like this, that would make him a 70% favorite, then I think he might be able to find that finish and progress to his dominant position. So that's what I'm going to be looking forward to. Last time out, he was able to show off a dominant skill set. He was the hitman for the UFC. Clayton Rodriguez missing weight, not showing up ready to go. Okay, no problem. We're going to send you in there against the Basharat brother. And he got handled accordingly. Now Taylor Lapilus went out there, did his job last time, but I don't know that the UFC wants to necessarily move him up the card. So we'll find out here. 31-year-old Lapilus against 26-year-old Basharat. Great fight, great matchmaking, striker versus grappler. But I think that it's going to be, Basharat's world if he gets it to the ground. Saga says, should be a good fight. Lapilus looks like he has legit takedown defense and calculated striking. Also, his early UFC stint, he fought a grappler and had no issue. He's got good BJJ. I'll look into exactly who you're talking about. 19-3, I mean, it's a fantastic record, right? You can't take much away from him. Lost to Latvertniev, not a bad loss. Lost to Eric Perez. Wins in the UFC over Leandro Issa, Ulka Sasaki, and Rocky Lee. I mean, not bad wins, but also, I do think, his best win might even be Nate Maness in TKO. Wilson Hayes. So he's got a very quality strength of schedule outside the UFC. Take nothing away from him, but currently he's on a 6-fight win streak, 31 years of age, a little bit old for this division as well, like we noted about that last fight. Something to keep note of. But this 26-year-old Basharat, I do think that his ground game is different. And I do think that, again, Damon Blackshear, very talented on the ground, right? That's his bread and butter. That's where he wants to take the fight. And, he got audited a little bit in that fight by Basharat. So I think that that's something to keep note of because Lapilus, great takedown defense, no doubt about it. But once he gets into some of those positions, that's where I'm curious how he's able to respond. I will do some more due diligence though, and watch his specific grappling sequencing. But with that being said, let's move along to this next fight here at 145 pounds, featherweight division. We got Westin Wilson taking on Gene Silva. This is an interesting fight because Gene Silva is a guy that I don't know a ton about, right? He's out of Fighting Nerds, great camp that I love, Caio Barajo and the boys, right? Great gym, very smart. They know what they're doing. I actually think I've heard Gene Silva maybe on Caio Barajo's podcast before because I listened to Caio Barajo do picks on the UFC. I think he's a very smart guy, very insightful. He's a fighting nerd. I like to consider myself a fighting nerd. So I don't train at the gym, but I like to just, consider myself of the same ethos, the same spirit as these guys. And Gene Silva went out there on Contender Series last time out, got a clear unanimous decision win. He's big on the elbows against the fence. He's a damaging, violent striker. He likes to go out there and throw heavy shots. You look at his wins, it shows, right? 8 wins by knockout. Out of his 11 professional wins. So vast majority of the time, he's going out there looking to take somebody's head off, looking to swing, looking to finish. And we know that Westin Wilson is liable to getting clipped, getting rocked, getting hurt. He runs forward. He puts his chin on the line. He is also a guy that can get submitted, 11-4 career to the submission. So he's much more dangerous than you'd expect on the ground from an upstate karate guy. But in addition, he is a guy that has more liabilities on the feet than you would expect for an upstate karate guy, right? So I think Westin Wilson, last time out against Joanderson Brito, showed off the fact that he's not, a slouch. He's not out there to just give up in these fights. He's trying to win, but he also just doesn't necessarily have the physicality or the durability to take some of these huge shots from big guys. And Joanderson Brito, we know he can separate any man from consciousness. So no shame in losing that fight, but the fight that's really concerning for me is in 2022, he got knocked out brutally by Teruto Ishihara in a fight that looked so ugly, just chasing after him, throwing 1-2s, not showing the best finishing instincts. He had hurt Teruto a couple times, I thought, and he didn't follow up very well. He was getting his legs kicked out from underneath him. He didn't take advantage of opportunities to try and out-grapple Ishihara. So I don't know that Westin Wilson is all the way there, but in terms of feathers in his cap and in terms of things that you could point to as a positive, I listened to an interview that he did. He said that he's going, with the John Danaher guys. He's been doing rounds with Gary Tonin. That's a great guy to get rounds with. He's been doing, directions under John Danaher, picking his brain about all sorts of martial arts. I think that's great for your career, for your development. But how much is that going to change the outcome in this fight? It seems like Brazilians with power might not be a good recipe for this guy, Westin Wilson, but I'm just going to have to look into the ground game of Gene Silva and make sure he's not going to give up some comical submission. But I think training with a guy like Caio Barajo, training with the Fighting Nerds, they should have him, wised up for exactly what to expect here. Keep your distance, manage the fight, do some damage. You should be able to get Westin Wilson out of the fight more often than not. And so hopefully Westin Wilson eventually is able to get a win in the UFC. But I just think that this is not a great matchup for him to do so. Gene Silva seems like a guy that could just have too much power and too much aggression for a guy that's been clipped a couple times and taken out of the fight. Next up, guys, let's talk about a lightweight contest. We've got Tom Nolan taking on Nikolas Motta. And Tom Nolan kind of burst on the scene with that win on Contender Series, right? Bogdangrad looked very confident, 11-1, had a lot more professional experience, and he got diddy bopped. That's no other way to put it, right? So you look, and Tom Nolan only one loss as an amateur back in 2018. The guy has been undefeated as a professional, started his career in 2020, has not looked back since, has been cleaning up in the eternal MMA promotion, getting a bunch of wins, looking aces while doing so, getting a bunch of finishes along the way. And so you look, he's got 2 wins by decision, multiple wins by decision as a amateur as well. So he's got the experience, he's got the cage time, and he also has been much more of an aggressive finisher in his recent fights, right? 4-fight finishing streak, all by knockout, all by finish. And I also think this guy has a ground game that he hasn't shown off yet. Training at Team Compton Training Center, he looks like he's putting together a pretty well-rounded skill set. And I like what I've seen from this kid coming into this fight. On the other side here, Nikolas Motta, I don't like much of what I've seen from Nikolas Motta at all. Last time out, he should have been submitted. I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. He was submitted. It was complete referee error. I thought that he was screwed in that spot. So I'm thinking to myself, the Manuel Torres fight, the Trey Ogden fight twice in a row, he looked terrible. Manuel Torres is a tough guy, hard to fight. Manuel Torres battered him, hurt him, brutalized him. And then that Trey Ogden fight, not a great look. Cameron Van Camp, fine win there, great win, but I believe he's moved on to bare knuckle. He's certainly no longer with the UFC. Jim Miller, absolutely starched him in the second round. But he had hurt him badly in the first round. Then he goes back out in the second round and just knocks his head off. So I think that when I'm looking at this fight on paper, I say to myself, Nikolas Motta has never had the best chin that I've ever seen. Nikolas Motta doesn't have a great ground game, right? No wins by submission, not a very offensive grappler. So I don't know where his real distinct advantages are. He's a mediocre boxer from everything it seems at this level. And I just don't know where his plus level skills are. So I think Tom Nolan's probably going to smoke him. And I think Tom Nolan has, every path to victory. I could see him winning by knockout. I could see him winning by submission. I could see him winning by decision. I just think he's going to steamroll this guy. It's my God's honest truth opinion. So looking at the odds here, Tom Nolan's minus 240, best available on Bet Rivers, and plus 205, the best available comeback on Nikolas Motta. I don't see this one going very well for Motta. I don't like the direction he's been headed. He's got more experience. He's fought some tough guys, way more professional experience, right? 3 times the amount. So give him that credit where it's due. A little bit more seasoned, 30 years of age compared to just 23 for Tom Nolan, but 6-inch reach advantage, massive height advantage. I think he's the way bigger, stronger guy that hits harder, that's more durable. I like everything I'm seeing from Tom Nolan heading into this one. So I'll do a little bit more due diligence for sure, but definitely leaning towards the Nolan side. And I don't really believe in Nikolas Motta long-term, whether he wins or loses his fight. Next up, guys, let's discuss the matchup that I've been doing a little bit of tape study on. And I don't do tape study most of the time before my first look, but it's over the holiday. I wanted to make sure that I had something to say about this fight, right? Because I didn't know who Felipe Bunes was. So I wanted to make sure I did a little research, I did a little due diligence, so I can come to you guys with some real thoughts and opinions. Joshua Van, I knew about Joshua Van. I bet on Josh Van fights before twice now. So I have a good feel for his game, but I wanted to do some research and due diligence on his opponent. Now, Felipe Bunes, what is interesting about him is that I've been watching him fight and he looks like a primary striker, right? Then you look at his Tapology and the guy has 8 wins by submission. So I have to go back further in his catalog and see exactly what's going on with this guy. Because number one, he's got a string of 3 losses in a row in ACA, all via decision, all to very tough looking records on paper. So I want to watch those fights and see, were they robbery decisions or were they real? Was he good at grappling or was he not? And kind of get a better feel for it. I haven't watched those ACB fights, but what I have done, excuse me, what I have done is I've watched the Yumi Horiuchi fight, I watched the Huascar Cruz fight, and I watched the Jussier Formiga fight. So Formiga, for context, missed weight by a large amount for that fight. And they were supposed to fight, I think, at 25. They ended up fighting at 135. And Formiga, I think, missed weight for 35. So Formiga just had no desire to make the weight that night at all. And instead, he comes in, grappling heavy game plan, and he was able to get him to the mat. And I thought Bunes' grappling looked very suspect in that fight against Formiga. But you got to remember, it's up a weight, it's on short notice, it's like all these things. So I just want to give him a little bit of the pass there. That he took a short notice fight up a weight, and everybody expected Formiga to get the job done, and Formiga got the job done, right? But I think of a guy like Bunes as, why did the UFC sign him? Right. I tweeted this out the other day. I said, why would the UFC sign this guy when he doesn't have all these, great wins on his resume? When, in his last 7 fights, he's 3-4, right? How does he get signed to the UFC? I really believe the reason is, number one, he's got a lot of wins by finish and they like finishers. And number two, he's willing to say yes to tough opponents and he's willing to say yes to tough circumstances. You miss weight, doesn't matter. Hard fight, doesn't matter. I think that's what they really like and admire about this guy. So they brought him in to fight Zhalgas Zhumagulov. He had a problem with a drug test. It's listed as a medical issue on Tapology, but somebody made me aware of that on Twitter. I believe it was one of the guys from the Chronic Combat Conversations podcast. So I wanted to shout out those guys. But when I'm thinking about this fight, I'm saying to myself, man, this is a fight where Felipe Bunes, in his recent fights, is coming out there looking to strike, looking to get knockouts, looking to do damage with his hands, and also looking to time these spinning kicks to the head. He's looking for wheel kicks. He's looking to be very aggressive. And that has scared a couple of his opponents. I felt like Jussier Formiga wanted nothing to do with his striking after they exchanged for a little bit and then decided, hey, let's make this a grappling match. Let's get this on the ground. Joshua Van, it's not going to be like that, right? He's a completely different style matchup. Even when you look at Yuma Horiuchi and Huascar Cruz, a couple of these guys were willing to go out there and strike with him and put on that display on the feet. But I do wonder what happens when this guy is pressed. He seems like he's very tall and a little bit lanky. I do think he could probably be taken down, but I also think massive age gap between these two, right? Joshua Van, 12 years younger in this spot. 22 years of age compared to 34 for Bunes. Bunes also has way more professional experience, right? 19 fights compared to just 10 for Joshua Van. But Joshua Van, much better win percentage, right? 9-1 in his career as a professional compared to 13-6 for Bunes. So Bunes, 34 years of age, for a debutant in the flyweight division, I mean, it's certainly quite old to be making this kind of spot, but like I said, he was supposed to fight Zhalgas. He was supposed to fight Deniz Bandar. They've been trying to get him in there for a while. And now you're looking at a guy from 4-Ounce Fight Club in Josh Van, who is going to be at a 6-inch reach disadvantage here. He's going to be at a 2-inch height disadvantage here. but he's probably going to be the way more powerful guy because he's got more proven knockout ability. Felipe Bunes, his last couple fights has looked like a striker, but Joshua Van has looked like a striker since he went pro. The kid has a lot of knockouts, 5 wins by knockout in 9 professional wins. So more often than not, when he's getting it done by knockout. And then as far as the ground game goes, that is where his one loss is. He got submitted by Devin Jackson back in Fury in 2021 via rear naked choke. And so when you look at Felipe Bunes, you look at the fact that he's got 8 wins by submission, right? Maybe that's where he's going to want to take this fight. Maybe he's going to want to try and submit this guy, take it to the ground. His last win via submission was in 2021 via triangle armbar. He has a flying triangle armbar win in 2018 as well. And let's go look at his share dog record because that should have the exact method of victory for these contests. Submission due to armbar, submission due to triangle choke, armbar, reverse triangle armbar. Man, he does not have a very conventional ground game from what it seems. It seems like he's getting taken down a lot and then using an armbar off his back. But I will go watch his film. I will go let you guys know what I think about his jiu-jitsu after I study it. But for now, what I know is that his striking is okay, but his cardio is not great. His fundamentals aren't perfect on the feet. He can be chin checked a little bit. He's never been knocked out, but he could definitely be touched on the chin, right? His chin is not very well protected. He's been submitted twice as well, once by Formiga and once back in his regional days. His first fight, as a matter of fact, Daniel Rodriguez was able to submit him. So I think he takes a lot of pride in his submission game. I think Josh Van has to be very careful, right? I think for Josh Van, the way he loses this fight, the way he makes a critical error is going to the ground with this older, more experienced guy from Brazil who knows what he's doing and could armbar him or catch him in something. But I think outside of that, Josh Van should have the advantages with his ability to mix up the targets with simple, straight, fast, effective punching. So I don't see Josh Van getting clipped with a head kick here more often than not. I think he's smart about his approach in the striking, but it's interesting that he went from being a plus 180 underdog against Zhalgas Zhumagulov to being a minus 200 his last 2 fights. And, I do think last time out, it might have been a mistake for me to fade him with the plus 200 on Borjas. So do I want to go again? Do I want to fade him again? No, because I think Josh Van is talented. I think he's got some real upside, but I just think that this does have some banana peel elements to it where his one loss is via submission. It wasn't all that long ago. And Josh is definitely getting better every time out. He's a really dangerous guy. He's got a lot of power. But I do just think one mistake on the ground could cost him a fight at some point early in his UFC career because he's still very young and he hasn't been training jiu-jitsu all that long. So for me, those are the dynamics of this fight. But what I kind of like for Barrier's point in the chat here, he says first finish by Josh in the UFC. I like the fight not to go. I like the under here because if Josh was to lose this fight, I feel like he probably gets submitted, in something, where he just makes a silly mistake. So more often than not, I'm expecting Josh to get the win here and to do it emphatically. But Bunes never been knocked out before. Let's see if his newfound love of striking on the feet gets him clipped here. So there you have it, guys. We are done talking about these prelims. What I want to do is I want to open up the floor for the last minute or two of the show. Any questions, comments, or concerns that you guys have, because we do have a bunch of people rocking with us live in the chat. Pepe Sylvia says black belt versus blue belt. I don't know that to be true, but that does sound like it could very well be accurate from you. So then the question would be, can he achieve takedowns in this spot? Because I did think that Josh Van seems like a guy who was pretty difficult for Zhalgas to take down. But I think that that's a interesting point by you, Pepe. And it's something that we're going to have to look for in the markets as well. I bet Van by submission in the fight against Zhalgas, I think. And now it looks like I might be at a point where maybe Bunes by submission could be the play in this spot, especially just for a small amount as a hedge, potentially as well. To add on to Lidze versus Hawes, big mistake by Dan, the referee, just after the knee injury, too much hesitation. The knee injury, I don't know that it necessarily qualifies for stoppage, right? Because I don't know that Hawes screamed. And most of the time, you need a bone break or a compound fracture or something like that to stop the fight as a referee intervention. If somebody just tears their ligaments, that's just the cost of doing business sometimes. And that could happen. Even in grappling matches, guys will get their ligaments torn apart and sometimes elect not to tap. Is it psychotic? Sure. But do people do it? They absolutely do. Shout out to Saga Analysis, which says Bunes wrestling doesn't look good to me. I will definitely have to look at Bunes' wrestling myself and give you my opinion in deeper fashion there. What are your thoughts on Ankalaev's salty reaction to his draw on the mic after the Blachowicz fight? Yeah, I felt like he's justified in his reaction. When you go back and watch the tape on that fight, at the time, night of, I would have told you Blachowicz deserved the win. Why? Because I had a bet on Jan Blachowicz. I would have said a draw was fair, but I thought that I deserved the win. And the truth is, I rewatched it and I have Ankalaev rounds 1, 4, and 5, right? Is that something I love? Right? Do I wish it was that way? No, but it's just the reality, right? I think he did the better work in round 1. I think he did the clear better work in rounds 4 and 5. So for me, that's what it ultimately came down to. Was round 1 close? Yeah, it was absolutely close. But I just go back and watch it, and I'm a pretty good fight analyst, I like to think. I'm a pretty good judger of fights when I don't have any more material stake on the fight, right? I ended up voiding on that bet on Jan Blachowicz anyway, right? I didn't get $1. I literally pushed, got the money back. And then with clear eyes, I watched it. I thought Ankalaev deserved to be upset there. I thought 1, 4, and 5 were his deserved rounds. But when I'm looking at, how Ankalaev is going to try and bounce back, I think it could go one of two ways, right? You could either be unmotivated by the fact that, hey, it didn't go my way. Woe is me. The things never go my way. I can't get a clean result. Or you could say, hey, I'm going to make this one definitive. I'm going to leave absolutely no doubt. And I'm going to go put a stamp on this performance. And I think that if he does, if he goes out there and puts a stamp on this fight, then I think he's right back in the title talk. I think people are right back on the Ankalaev train. But if it's another lackluster performance, if it's another inconclusive result, if it's another, laying of an egg or something like that, then I think he's going to have a lot to answer for. And I think people are maybe going to push him a little bit further down in the division. He literally stood between the fighters and then let them continue just so Hawes could be KO'd. Yeah, I mean, he didn't cover himself in glory there. I think that's fair. Felt bad for Hawes there. Yeah, sure, absolutely. A lot of people love Raquel Pennington over Mayra Buena Silva. That does shock me. But I wish them well, and I hope that they bet it accordingly. Matt R says Jan won. Round 1 was a toss-up, but Jan landed the best strike that round. I mean, the best strike of one round doesn't matter. I think it's the cumulative damage in the round. I think it's the cumulative effect of all the strikes, but fair play. I mean, it's a close round, so I won't say you're crazy to think that. I think it's a close round, so fair play, my man, and I appreciate your feedback. Pepe says, winner of Walker and Ank versus the winner of Rakic and Yuri. Hey, all right, Pepe, the matchmaker over here. I like the sound of that. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I would not be surprised to see that. Will you be watching Fury grappling tonight? I think I probably will be. I think I probably will be. That sounds like a good time to me. So we'll see. I might be watching some football. I might be watching some Fury grappling. A couple different things along the way, but definitely going to tune in to some sporting events today along the way. So appreciate you guys for being here, everybody, for rocking with me live. What I want to say is if you guys want UFC futures talk, let me know in the comment section below. I can't really access them on my book, but there are books that offer them. I'm happy to pull up the odds board and kind of just talk through some of the thoughts that I have about those things. But if it's not something that interests you guys, no problem. I'll just keep that one on the cutting room floor. So if you guys want another live stream later tonight, then I will probably do it about that futures talk. So let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. That's what we've got today. And without further ado, I just want to say thank you so much for your support. God bless each and every one of you guys. If you have questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and throw those in the chat below, and make sure that you come back next time. Make sure that you drop a like on the video, get subscribed to the channel, and hit that bell for notifications so you never miss a live stream. I'm going to be going live a lot more. So if you want to make sure that you're always here and rocking with us with the sharpest chat in the game, then I really appreciate if you guys would do those small little things that help me and help other people find the show. Also, this and part 1 will be available on podcast platforms. I'm going to make sure I get that done by tonight. So if I don't get it done, hold me to it. Hold my feet to the fire, call me an embarrassment, yell at me, embarrass me, clown me. But if I do get it done tonight, give me a little 5-star rating and review if you ever listen on podcast, because once again, it's going to help other people discover the show. Thank you so much. God bless you all. Peace, love, and chicken grease. Have a happy new year if I don't talk to you before then, but I think I will be. So we'll talk to you guys very soon. Thanks, everybody.